How about a bit of big breaking news late on a Friday? A federal judge appointed by President George W. Bush in 2002 has issued a federal court ruling late today, essentially dismantling the don't ask, don't tell policy. This is the second very strong federal court ruling against the military's gay ban in less than a month. The plaintiff in this case has not done a national TV interview before. She will be joining us in just a moment for an exclusive discussion, along with someone whose face will be familiar to those of you who have been following our coverage of this issue over the last 7 weeks or so. Over the last year or so. The last 7 weeks or so have been an unbelievably good 7 weeks for gay rights in America, at least on paper. The proposition that removed existing same-sex marriage rights after couples had already been married in California, the Prop 8 case, Prop 8 struck down as unconstitutional 7 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Don't Ask, Don't Tell struck down in its totality as unconstitutional by a federal judge in California. 2 days ago, a ban on same-sex couples adopting children passed by the legislature in Florida more than 30 years ago, also struck down by a state court judge. And now the U.S. Air Force Major Marjorie Witt case. In a courtroom in Tacoma, Washington today, Judge Ronald Layton, appointed by George W. Bush in 2002, was ruling for a second time on Major Witt's case. Now, Major Witt was suspended in 2004. She was ultimately discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. In 2007, she sued the government over her dismissal. This same judge who ruled today, Ronald Layton, ruled the first time against Major Witt, saying her dismissal was proper under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. But then something remarkable happened. When Major Witt appealed that ruling, the higher court, the federal appeals court, sided with her, and they sided with her in a very specific way. They told Judge Layton in the lower court that he had to hear her case again. But this time, he had to apply a different legal standard when he judged her case. If you want to know anything about how this part of civil rights in America goes, if you want to know how Don't Ask, Don't Tell is going to get struck down by the courts, and that's how it's probably going to die, what the court told Judge Layton was that he had to consider Margie Witt personally. He had to rule on whether her, specifically her as an individual person, her being fired, was necessary to further the military goals of unit cohesion and morale and readiness, the goals that the policy is supposed to further. The policy says gay people have to be rooted out of the military and fired from their jobs because of unit cohesion and morale and readiness, because those military goals require it. Well, the appeals court told Judge Layton, you know, they got to prove that. Judge Layton looked at Margie Witt's case again, and today, this time, said no way does firing her help the military. Under what is known as the Witt standard, Judge Layton ruled today that the Air Force must reinstate her, in his words, as soon as practicable. From the ruling, quote, the evidence produced at trial overwhelmingly supports the conclusion that the suspension and discharge of Margaret Witt did not significantly further the important government interest in advancing unit morale and cohesion. To the contrary, the actions taken against Major Witt had the opposite effect. Her unit is a highly professional, rapid response air evacuation team. It's comprised of flight nurses and medical technicians who are well-trained, well-led, and highly motivated. They provide a vital service to our fighting men and women around the world. Serving within that unit are known or suspected gay or lesbian servicemen and women. There's no evidence before this court to suggest that their service within the unit causes problems of the type predicted in the congressional findings of fact that justify the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. These people train together, fly together, care for patients together, deploy together. There is nothing in the record before this court suggesting that the sexual orientation, acknowledged or suspected, has negatively impacted the performance, dedication, or enthusiasm of the unit. There's no evidence that wounded troops care about the sexual orientation of the flight nurse or medical technician tending to their wounds. The evidence before the court is that Major Margaret Witt was an exemplary officer. She was an effective leader, a caring mentor, a skilled clinician, and an integral member of an effective team. Her loss within the squadron resulted in a diminution of the unit's ability to carry out its mission. Good flight nurses, the judge says, good flight nurses are hard to find. The evidence clearly supports the plaintiff's assertion that the reinstatement of Major Witt would not adversely affect morale or unit cohesion. And then he said they had to take her back. Joining us now, Major Margie Witt and Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach. Colonel, Major, thank you both for being here, and congratulations on this ruling.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
Major Witt, let me ask what you think this means practically for you in the short term. Do you expect that you will be reinstated right away?
You know, I sure hope so. I'm ready whenever they are.
What have you been doing since you were discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy? What have you been doing in civilian life?
I'm a pediatric physical therapist, and I'm also the rehab coordinator for the Veterans Hospital.
And if this goes through, if what the judge says has to happen ends up happening, if the Air Force does take you back, you're eager to get back into the Air Force?
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait to get back to my unit and be with my incredible unit members. They're a wonderful group.
Colonel Fehrenbach, you are currently fighting your own discharge from the Air Force. Like Major Witt, you did not tell anyone anything about your sexual orientation. You were outed by a third party. What does this decision today mean to you and to your case?
Well, the decision today just solidifies what was before known as the Witt standard and sets a precedent. So it gives me a lot of hope that we'll be successful in my fight. As you said, I didn't tell. You know, they asked me, and I've been fighting this battle for 2 years now. And again, from day one, when I was confronted this in May 16, 2008, 2 days later is when Margie got her first victory, and that gave me hope. And I hope today doesn't just give me hope, but there are thousands of people out there being confronted with a Don't Ask, Don't Tell case right now, and I hope Margie's victory today gives them hope as well and allows them to fight.
Victor, let me ask you specifically about the rationale for the judge's ruling. It wasn't just that Major Witt should not have been fired because her being gay wasn't harming the military. What the judge ruled essentially was that firing her is what harmed the military. I wonder if that rationale, either in legal terms, in sort of nuts and bolts legal terms as a precedent, or just in terms of the morale of the people who are fighting this policy, if that is a significant part of the ruling.
I absolutely think it is. You know, as you mentioned, he said that it wasn't her orientation that was a problem for the unit, it was when they fired her. And then he added, good nurses, good flight nurses are hard to find. You know, I live it every day. If you pull me out of my unit, it's going to harm that unit. And not only that, but it affects the morale of my unit. So I think that's across the board. And again, they said in my case as well that my presence was detrimental to good order, discipline, morale, and unit cohesion. The irony of that was at the time when they said that, not one single person in my unit, except for my commander and my number 2 in charge, even knew of the nature of my case. So they have no grounds to discharge me.
Margie, after the ruling, the judge in this case, Judge Layton, I know that he brought himself to tears and much of the courtroom to tears when he read a statement describing the stresses on you as a person to be what he called a central figure in a long-term, highly charged civil rights movement. He described how much it resonated with him personally when you said how important your family was in supporting you. I imagine that was surprising. What did it mean to you that the judge addressed you in those very personal terms at that point?
It was very surprising. It was very heartfelt. He spoke to me directly. I think he really understands the impact that it has on everyone around you, particularly family, and how thankful I was to have my parents behind me. And I think he really gets that, and he knew that it was a big struggle and a big event.
Major Witt, your case is similar to Colonel Fehrenbach's in that you weren't asked, you didn't tell, you were outed by a third party. Before that happened, what did you expect from the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy? Did you know that you could be outed and investigated and kicked out without ever volunteering to anybody that you were gay?
The third party thing was very enlightening. Yeah. No, I wasn't aware of that. I think I was aware of I wasn't going to tell. They weren't supposed to ask me, but I really wasn't aware that the third party could out me at any time.
Victor, let me just ask you one last question. I know you told us here on this show that the president told you man to man, eye to eye, that he was going to end this policy. He told you he was going to get it done. I remember you saying it here on this show. I wonder, as things have changed so much since you and I first talked over a year ago, I wonder if you are starting to think that maybe it's going to be people like you and Margie Witt and Mike Almy who are going to change this policy despite the president, not because of him.
As you mentioned, I've been disappointed over and over again by the lack of leadership and courage we've seen from so many of our political leaders. Thanks to Major Witt and people like her, I've had hope. I've been able to fight. And on that note, we've experienced a loss, you could call it, this week, but that fight is not over as well. I think people need to realize they can still contact their senators. I personally would like to sit down and talk with my senator from Ohio, Senator Voinovich, and tell him my story, maybe to sway his decision there. I would love to sit down with Senator McCain. I would love Senator McCain to come to work with me on Monday and see how today's military operates and see how this is a non-issue to the military. He wants to rely on a hypothetical survey. He can come to work with me and see how professional military people operate.
Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach and Major Margie Witt, again, congratulations on this big freaking deal of a ruling, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. I wish I was there to take you both out for a beer.
Well, Rachel, I've got a hat for you on Monday, and Go Irish beat Stanford.
That's going to be your consolation hat after Stanford beats you guys. But cheers, Victor. Appreciate it.
Not right. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. All right, so the administration and the Senate are unwilling or unable to do what the federal courts appear to have no problem doing. In other words, when it's not political, don't ask, don't tell does not stand up. In a moment, why that is and what happens next. We'll be right back.